In the hills above Los Angeles, a mansion sits shrouded in mystery. Inside, some of Hollywood's most influential figures gather for a ritual that would shock the public if revealed. The year is 1946, and at the center of this gathering stands a man known as the Great Beast 666, Aleister Crowley. But this isn't just a story about occult rituals in Hollywood. This is about how one of history's most notorious figures shaped the entertainment industry we know today and continues to influence it from beyond the grave, often with deeply troubling consequences for our society. I'm going to take you on a journey that connects the dots between the world's wickedest man and the glittering stars of Hollywood. A journey that reveals how Crowley's philosophy of "do what thou wilt" became the hidden mantra behind some of cinema's greatest works. A philosophy that has helped erode the moral fabric of our culture and replace selflessness with narcissism. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Crowley appears on the cover of the Beatles' Sgt. Pepper album, why Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page bought Crowley's former home, and most importantly, how a rocket scientist obsessed with Crowley's teachings helped create the foundation for modern Hollywood. But first, we need to understand who Aleister Crowley was and why his dark shadow looms so large over Tinseltown. Aleister Crowley was born Edward Alexander Crowley in 1875 to a wealthy and deeply religious family in England. His parents were part of the Plymouth Brethren, a conservative Christian denomination. His father, a traveling preacher, read Bible verses to young Crowley every day after breakfast. But this strict religious upbringing would eventually lead Crowley to rebel in spectacular fashion. After losing his father to lung cancer at age 11, Crowley inherited the family fortune and began questioning everything about his Christian background. While studying at Cambridge, he indulged in sexual activities with local girls and prostitutes, and developed a fascination with the occult. As author Tim Cummings writes, he was a master of ceremonial magic, yoga, Kabbalah, tarot, and numerous meditation traditions, a mountaineer, poet, and chess player of distinction. What Cummings fails to mention is that Crowley was also a sadist who delighted in cruelty. He was known to file his teeth to points so he could bite women during sexual encounters, drawing blood in what he called the serpent's kiss. His relationships invariably ended in disaster, with many of his lovers descending into madness, alcoholism, or suicide. But it was in 1904, during the trip to Egypt with his wife Rose, that Crowley's life would change forever. In a Cairo hotel room over 3 consecutive days, Crowley claimed to have received a message from an entity named Aiwass, who dictated what would become the Book of the Law, the cornerstone of Crowley's new religion, Thelema. The book's most famous line, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." This philosophy, a direct inversion of the golden rule found in most major religions, would eventually find its way to Hollywood, but through a most unexpected channel: rocket science. Let me introduce you to Jack Parsons. Jack Parsons was an American rocket propulsion researcher at the California Institute of Technology. He was one of the principal founders of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory and the Aerojet Corps. His rocket research was some of the earliest in the United States, and his pioneering work in the development of solid fuel and the invention of JATO units for aircraft was of great importance to the start of humanity's space age. But there was another side to Parsons, a side obsessed with the occult teachings of Aleister Crowley. In 1942, Parsons was appointed head of the Agape Lodge of the OTO, or Ordo Templi Orientis, by Crowley himself. The OTO was a secret society that practiced Crowley's Thelemic principles, including what they called sex magic, ritualistic sexual practices designed to harness magical energies. Among Parsons' many sex partners was that of his own mother. Their incestuous encounters were filmed. Both mother and son engaged in bestiality, and both appear to have been among that species of psychotic who can function normally in public and achieve positions of authority over others. This disturbing behavior wasn't an aberration. It was a direct application of Crowley's philosophy that nothing should be forbidden, that all taboos should be broken in the pursuit of personal will. The damage this caused to those around him was considered irrelevant. But what does this have to do with Hollywood? Here's where our story takes an unexpected turn. There was no clear separation between Parsons' professional and occult lives. Before each rocket test, he would recite Crowley's poem, Hymn to Pan. This bizarre intersection of cutting-edge science and ancient occultism created a unique environment in Pasadena, California, one that would soon attract some of Hollywood's most influential figures. Parsons' mansion at 1003 South Orange Grove Avenue in Pasadena became known as the Parsonage. It was here that he hosted wild parties and occult rituals that drew in Hollywood's elite. Actors, directors, and writers would mingle with scientists and occultists in an atmosphere of unbridled hedonism. These gatherings weren't just harmless fun, they were deliberate attempts to normalize behavior that had previously been considered immoral or destructive. The participants weren't just breaking taboos, they were actively working to reshape society's moral compass, replacing community values with radical individualism. In 1945, Parsons met a charismatic science fiction writer who would change the course of his life, and eventually, the lives of countless Hollywood stars. That writer was L. Ron Hubbard, the future founder of Scientology. In a 1946 communique to Crowley, Parsons wrote, "About 3 months ago, I met U.S. Navy Captain L. Ron Hubbard. Although Ron had no formal training in magic, he has an extraordinary amount of experience and understanding in the field. He is the most thelemic person I have ever met and is in complete accord with our principles. He is also interested in establishing the new eon. We are pooling our resources in a partnership that will act as a limited company to control our business ventures." Together, Parsons and Hubbard performed a series of rituals known as the Babylon Working, designed to summon an incarnation of the goddess Babylon, the female counterpart to Crowley's beast. Shortly after these rituals, Parsons met Marjorie Cameron, who he believed was the physical manifestation of Babylon. Cameron would later go on to appear in films by experimental filmmaker Kenneth Anger and Curtis Harrington, becoming a bridge between Crowley's occult world and Hollywood. But before we explore that connection further, let's pause to consider what happened next with Hubbard. L. Ron Hubbard eventually absconded with Parsons' money and his girlfriend, Betty Northrup. He went on to found Scientology, which today boasts more than 8 million members worldwide, including high-profile celebrities like Tom Cruise, Will Smith, John Travolta, and Lisa Marie Presley. The influence of Crowley's teachings on Hubbard's Scientology is a matter of debate, but the connections are undeniable. Both systems involve a hierarchical structure of initiation. Both promise enhanced abilities through specialized techniques, and both have been accused of exploiting their followers financially. This exploitation is a direct extension of Crowley's philosophy. The strong should dominate the weak. Personal advancement matters more than the welfare of others. It's a worldview that stands in direct opposition to traditional values of humility, compassion, and service to others. As for Parsons, his story ended tragically. In 1952, he died in an explosion in his home laboratory. There is now a crater named after him on the dark side of the moon, a fitting tribute to a man who lived between the worlds of science and the occult. But Parsons' death didn't end Crowley's influence on Hollywood. In fact, it was just the beginning. Enter Kenneth Anger, perhaps the most direct conduit of Crowley's philosophy into Hollywood's bloodstream. As an artist and an outsider, Kenneth Anger was the West Coast's answer to Andy Warhol, a California boy who hosted rituals for the Church of Satan in his San Francisco mansion and introduced the Rolling Stones to the occult, a man who found a muse in Mick Jagger, but a bigger one in Charles Manson's henchmen. Yes, you heard that right. Anger was fascinated by Charles Manson's family, particularly Bobby Beausoleil, who participated in the murder of a man in Topanga Canyon before the infamous Tate LaBianca murders. This attraction to violence and chaos wasn't incidental. It was a direct outgrowth of Crowley's teachings about breaking all taboos and living beyond conventional morality. Anger was a devoted follower of Crowley's thelema and incorporated its principles into his experimental films. His most famous work, Scorpio Rising, 1964, combined homoerotic imagery, Nazi symbolism, and classic rock music in a way that would influence generations of filmmakers. The year's 1964. A man in tight leather pants walks into a room, whips a sheet off a motorcycle while Fools Rush In plays, and a 27-minute feast of abs, skulls, cigarettes, and James Dean lookalikes gets underway. This fusion of occult symbolism, sexuality, and rock music would become a template for countless music videos and films in the decades to come, normalizing imagery and ideas that would have shocked previous generations. But Anger's influence extended far beyond his own films. He introduced the Rolling Stones to Crowley's work, which inspired their song Sympathy for the Devil. Mick Jagger even composed the soundtrack for Anger's film Invocation of My Demon Brother. It was a meeting of minds, Anger later said about the group. They were typical of a lot of musicians. They wanted to climb on the wavelength. Anger's mansion in San Francisco, known as the Westerfeld House, became a gathering place for occultists, musicians, and filmmakers. The Church of Satan founder Anton LaVey would visit with his pet lion, whose claw marks are still visible on the woodwork. But Crowley's influence on Hollywood goes beyond these direct connections. His philosophy of breaking taboos and exploring the darker aspects of human nature has permeated countless films and TV shows, often with destructive consequences for our culture. Consider how Hollywood has gradually normalized behaviors that were once considered harmful or immoral. The glorification of violence, the objectification of women, the celebration of greed and selfishness. All of these trends align perfectly with Crowley's maxim, "Do what thou wilt." Crowley has directly inspired numerous movie characters, including La Chiffre in Ian Fleming's Casino Royale, and Satanist witch Adrian Marcato in Roman Polanski's Rosemary's Baby. Even in anime like Yu-Gi-Oh!, one character named Aleister bears Crowley's unicursal hexagram on his forehead. Beyond these direct references, Crowley's thelemic philosophy and vision of a new eon can be detected in countless mass media products. As journalist Justin Chapman notes, OTO initiates authored mass-market stories, especially science fiction, with subliminal, occult themes published in popular books and magazines. Among the most influential of these were Robert Heinlein's Stranger in a Strange Land, A.H. White's Rocket to the Morgue, and Arthur C. Clarke's The Sentinel, and Childhood's End. Science fiction became the perfect vehicle for spreading thelemic ideas, as it could present radical concepts under the guise of fantasy. This predictive programming helped shape America's vision of the future, influencing everything from architecture to transportation to social values. The result has been a gradual erosion of traditional values in favor of what philosopher Ayn Rand would later call the virtue of selfishness, a concept that aligns perfectly with Crowley's "Do what thou wilt." Where previous generations valued humility, service to others, and self-sacrifice, modern Hollywood consistently promotes self-fulfillment, personal gratification, and the pursuit of power as the highest goods. But perhaps the most direct line from Crowley to modern Hollywood runs through director Kenneth Anger to filmmakers like Martin Scorsese and David Lynch. Anger's influence on films runs throughout some of the industry's biggest talents, from Dennis Hopper's Easy Rider to directors like Martin Scorsese and David Lynch, who copied Anger's habit of layering happy-go-lucky oldies over otherwise ominous scenes. The juxtaposition of innocent music with disturbing imagery, a technique pioneered by Anger in his Crowley-inspired films, can be seen in iconic scenes like the ear-cutting scene in Reservoir Dogs or the murder scene in Goodfellas. This technique isn't just stylistic, it serves to desensitize viewers to violence by making it entertaining, even humorous, a moral inversion that Crowley would have appreciated. Even the structure of modern Hollywood, with its emphasis on spectacle and emotional manipulation, owes something to Crowley's understanding of ritual and its effects on consciousness. The difference is that where traditional rituals were designed to connect people to something larger than themselves, Hollywood's rituals often serve to isolate individuals in their own subjective experiences. But there's one more connection that brings our story full circle. One that links Crowley directly to one of Hollywood's most influential directors. Remember Preston Sturges? He was one of the most successful writer-directors of the 1940s, creating classics like The Lady Eve and Sullivan's Travels. What many people don't know is that as a 13-year-old boy, Sturges lived with Aleister Crowley for a time when his mother, Mary Dempsey, became Crowley's lover and magical partner. In his autobiography, Sturges recalled, "My mother and I were lucky to escape with our lives. If I had been a little older, he, Crowley, might not have escaped with his." The experience clearly left an impression on young Preston, who would go on to create films that subtly question social norms and conventional morality, themes that echo Crowley's rejection of traditional values. The impact of Crowley's philosophy on Hollywood, and by extension on our broader culture, has been profound and largely negative. By promoting radical individualism over community values, by elevating personal desire above moral responsibility, and by encouraging the breaking of taboos for its own sake, Crowley's influence has helped create a culture increasingly characterized by narcissism, alienation, and moral confusion. Consider the stark contrast between Crowley's "do what thou wilt" and the golden rule found in virtually all major religions: do unto others as you would have them do unto you. One philosophy centers the self and its desires. The other recognizes our interconnectedness and mutual responsibility. One leads to exploitation, the other to compassion. Hollywood, by largely embracing Crowley's philosophy, whether consciously or not, has become a powerful force for undermining the very values that once held communities together. The celebration of anti-heroes, the glorification of criminals, the constant pushing of moral boundaries, all of these trends can be traced back to Crowley's influence. As author Tim Cummings notes, unlike most historical figures who lose their relevancy as the years go by, Crowley's influence is steadily increasing in the 21st century. This should concern us all. A society built on Crowley's principles, where each person pursues their own will without regard for others, is not a society at all, but a collection of isolated individuals competing for dominance. The results of this experiment are already visible in rising rates of depression, addiction, and suicide, particularly among young people who have been most heavily influenced by Hollywood's messaging. So, the next time you watch a Hollywood blockbuster or binge a popular TV series, look a little deeper. Behind the glossy surface, you might just catch a glimpse of the great beast's shadow, a reminder that the most powerful magic of all might be the stories we tell ourselves, and that those stories can either elevate or degrade our humanity. Aleister Crowley may have died in 1947, but his spirit lives on in the dream factory of Hollywood, continuing to shape our collective imagination in ways both subtle and profound, often to our detriment. As Crowley himself once wrote, 1,000 years from now, the world will be sitting in the sunset of Crowleyanity. Looking at Hollywood today, he might not have been far off. But it's not too late to choose a different path, one based on humility rather than pride, on love for others rather than self-obsession, on moral courage rather than the endless pursuit of forbidden thrills. The choice, as always, is ours.